What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. One of the questions I get most often is which leather should I use for which projects? So today we're going to talk all about leather, what you need for your next project. Let's get started. Okay guys, getting into leathercraft can be a little bit intimidating just because there are so many different options with leather, so many different qualities and colors and types, and it can be kind of confusing. So today we're going to try and demystify a lot of these terms, and that's what we're going to do first is define all of the terms when we're looking for leather. So first, we want to talk about quality. When we talk about quality, we're talking about what section of the leather that we're using. Because believe it or not, all leather comes in pretty thick hides, and then it's split down into different layers, and those layers are sold at different price points because they have different qualities to them, and based off of the different layers, they're more expensive, they last longer, etc. So there are essentially three qualities of leather that you really want to pay attention to. We have full grain, we have top grain, and we have genuine. A lot of people think that genuine leather just means real leather. That's not actually the case. It's actually a quality of leather. And most of us leather crafters tend not to use genuine leather. It's usually used in mass production because it's much less expensive. You can make genuine leather look really good, but when we're doing leather craft, we essentially just want to work with full grain leather. Full grain leather is the very top layer of the hide. It comes with imperfections like bug bites and scars, and this is the reason a lot of luxury brands will actually use top grain leather because they want to buff out all those imperfections and then make it look really uniform. But if you're like me and you like character and you want to know its quality, I want to see those little bits of imperfections here and there because it just adds to the natural feel of that product. If you wanted something completely uniform, you can go to any cheap department store and pick up a bag for 30 bucks that looks like real leather, looks very uniform, but that's not what we're after. All right guys, so that's quality of leather. Now we're going to talk about tannage. Now with tannage, you really only need to consider two things. There's vegetable tanned and there's synthetically tanned leather. And most of the time, synthetically tanned leather, they use something called chromium. So you'll see chrome tanned versus veg tanned. Now here at OpenSea Leather, we only use vegetable tanned leather almost exclusively. I've messed around with chrome tanned a couple of times, but I really don't like it for a couple of reasons. The reasons why vegetable tanned is so much more expensive is because it takes 28 times as long to produce. So vegetable tanned leather is used using tannins that occur naturally in oak barks and leaves and just natural occurring tannins. And because those tannins act slower, it takes a lot longer for these to tan inside of a drum. But they're all natural, they're non-toxic, they create a more durable, long-lasting product, they patina better. I definitely feel like vegetable tanned leather is the only way to go if you're a leather crafter. Chrome tan definitely has its uses, again, more for the industrial production of leather goods. I have an example of it here. This is a popular leather crafter leather. It's called Crazy Horse. And here on the screen, you can see a cross section of that, and you can see that thin white line. That's how you know it's chrome tanned. Now, not all chrome tanned leather is gonna have that line because some chrome tanned leather is struck through, which just means it's dyed all the way through. But this one, as you can see on the screen, is not dyed all the way through. That thin blue line is actually what the hide looks like after it's chrome tanned, but before it's dyed. So when you're selecting your leathers, always look for vegetable tanned leather. Okay, so we talked for a second about dyeing, for example, struck through versus not struck through. Again, struck through is when it's dyed all the way through the hide. I prefer that, but a lot of thicker leathers like belt leathers won't have dye all the way through. I just think it looks better. You can always dye your edges, but I tend to look for leathers that are struck through. I also look for something called aniline dyed leather. So aniline dyed is when it's a clear or transparent dye. Think of like a wood finish that you can still see all of the grain. You don't want to cover that up. Like the example of a painted board versus like a stained board. Obviously the stained board, in my opinion, looks much better. So this is aniline dyed. You can still see all of the grain and all of the structure of the leather. And something like this is actually pigmented because you can't really get a white transparent dye. So you can see it's got some pigment in it. That pigment tends to wear off and you can get peeling. I'm sure you've all experienced that with a cheap couch. Starts to peel. That's because, well, that's for a lot of reasons, but one of it is has a thin layer of paint on it. This is very popular with like sneakers. They'll always paint their leather, and it's a great way to hide imperfections. But as leather crafters, we tend not to use pigmented leathers, although they have their place. I just tend not to use them. So when you're looking for leather, look for aniline dyed, look for full grain, look for struck through. We're just checking off all the boxes. Obviously, since we're talking about leather, we gotta shout out my boys, St. Crispin and St. Crispinian, the patron saints of leathercraft and shoemaking. So get up to them. Okay guys, the next thing we're gonna talk about is weight. Now, weight is an interesting term because when we're talking about weight, we're talking about the thickness of the leather. And you'd think, why are they talking about weight? Why are they measuring this in ounces? It comes from the textile industry doing denim. So there really isn't any correspondence to like a square foot of leather equals a certain amount of ounces. It's not like that. It's just a system they used here in America. We've messed up all of our measuring systems. It's just the way it is. You just gotta deal with it. But there's conversion charts all over the internet for millimeters to ounces, or even inches to ounces. But generally speaking, we're gonna be talking about ounces when we talk about leather. So there is a whole range of thicknesses and they all have their own application. You have from like 1 ounce all the way up to like 15, 16, something like this. We showed you the cross section of this earlier when we were talking about the different layers of grain. Something like this would be used for like insole making, when you're making shoes and boots, or saddlery. They'll use something super thick like this. And you have all the way down to like 1 ounce where you're gonna line things or do like really fine pockets like on a bifold. We're gonna get into what kind of weights you wanna use when we talk about each one of our products. But just know that the ounces is just talking about how thick the leather is, and that's gonna help you. And once you start working with stuff, you'll know exactly which weight or thickness you wanna use for each project. The next thing we wanna talk about is temper. Temper just means how rigid the leather is or how soft it feels in your hand. And again, there's no right or wrong answer for which type of leather, which temper to use with which project, but they're gonna produce vastly different end products. So you have from firm to medium to soft and everywhere in between. This is very subjective. So you're kind of relying on the tannery to, use their judgment as to what's soft and what's firm and what's medium. But I have a little trick I'm gonna show you. It's called the flop test, right out of Dave Portnoy's Pizza Review Handbook. I think it applies to leather. Okay, so when you're doing the flop test, obviously the thickness of the leather is gonna change how rigid it is. But we're gonna start with something firm like Butero. You can see there's pretty much no flop, okay? I mean, if you go like this, obviously it's just very rigid. I would say this is firm. Then if you went to something a little bit more medium, I'd say something like this. Now there's definitely some flop. This is bordering on soft, but not quite in my opinion. Something soft would be like this milled, where there's just absolutely no rigidity whatsoever. And then you have some stuff that's in between. This is on the firm end of medium, and this here would be also kind of on the firm end of medium. So just to review, we got firm, pretty much dead straight. We got medium firm, a little bit softer than that, a little bit softer than that, and then super soft and glovey. There you go, flop test. Now we're gonna talk about cuts. So when you buy leather, you're gonna see different cuts. You're gonna see something like side, bend, double shoulder, belly, neck, okay? So we're gonna try and, again, demystify some of this stuff for you. This right here is a side. I'm gonna go through and label some of the parts of the different hide. So right in here is called the bend, okay? It kind of is this section here. This is the tightest grain and the highest quality portion of the hide. So when you're making really high-end goods, you really wanna focus in this area. You wanna avoid what's called the belly, which is about right here. And again, the reason for that is because this grain is a lot softer. You can kind of see it here. When it gets really fuzzy on the back, that's when you know that the grain is kind of loose, because that's literally the little individual grains just not being as tightly woven together. So avoid some of the belly. The neck is decent for certain parts of things, or the shoulder. In fact, some of the highest end leather, like Butero, comes in double shoulder. I'll show you one of those in a second. But just when you're buying your leather and you're buying a full side, just remember to focus on this area. If you want to buy just bends themselves, you can do that as well. A lot of bridal leathers, shoemaking leathers, and things like that come in just bend. But that's a side. I'll go ahead and show you a double shoulder. Okay, so guys, this is a Butero double shoulder. You can, if you use your imagination, you imagine looking down at a cow from up above. You have a shoulder here and a shoulder here, and then it kind of goes a little bit into the bend. Now this is extremely high quality, super tight grain, and you can see all the texture in it, these natural fat wrinkles, which a lot of people love, just that natural character. So a lot of high-end leathers do come in double shoulder. The only bad thing about these is if you want to do something like belts or straps, you don't have as much length to cut full-length straps. So that's, if you're going to be making anything with long straps or belts, you tend to want to avoid something like a double shoulder and get like a full side. All right guys, so now we're going to go through each product and I'll tell you exactly what I use to make it, but just know from the get-go, so I'm not repeating myself every time, these are all full grain leather. They're all vegetable tanned. So you can just kind of check both of those boxes off. I'm mainly going to talk about weight here, so how thick the leather is, the temper, and a little bit of which part of the hide I've cut from. All right guys, so first up is this new bag that I've come up with recently. Don't have a name for it yet, but this is Pueblo leather. This is from Italy. This is 3 ounce pretty much everywhere. The reason I use 3 ounce here is because when I turn these seams, I want to be able to do that somewhat easily. If these seams are too thick, it's really hard to turn the bag back right side out. But for the thicker areas where I needed more strength, I just doubled up the leather. So this is 2 layers of 3.5 ounce. You're getting 6 or 7 ounces in the handles. All handles should be at least 5 ounces, all the way up to, I don't know, 8 or 9. So if you only have 3 ounce, double it up, stitch it up. The temper on here, I'd say this is pretty like medium firm, but the cool thing about vegetable tan leather is the more you use it, the softer it will get. Those fibers slowly kind of start to loosen up. That's why you have something like milled leather. This is incredibly glovey and soft, and this is very popular with a lot of women's bags these days. If you can see this texture in it, all this little pebbling, that's because this leather is thrown into a giant drum and just turned over and over and over, and that's slowly breaking down those fibers and putting in all these little creases and characters. So this is called milled leather. If you want something really glovey soft, look for that on any website, milling. All right, so next I'll talk about these little clutches. Again, this is Horween leather, tanned here in the USA. These are about 4 ounces, and this is probably medium firm, I would say. This is a Dublin leather, so this has a little bit of waxes and oils in it. And that just adds to, you know, the character, and also it'll kind of self-condition a little bit. And then I use kind of 3-4 ounces for all of my wallets, because if not, it can feel really bulky and heavy, and it won't have as much room for cards and cash and things like that. So speaking about wallets, these are our most popular item. This is the Hobe here. Now, this is again about 3 ounces. This is Butero, this is Italian leather, and this is a very firm leather. I use a firm temper leather with all of my wallets that are folded because I rely on the structure of the leather to maintain this shape. I can't use a really soft or glovey leather, and this just is gonna wear better over time, and you really want wallets to maintain their shape, unlike a bag, which can be floppy and kind of take on whatever it's carrying inside. Okay guys, so this is just a regular old laptop sleeve. So I actually redesigned it. This has some curves now in it. But this is, again, that same weight, about 3 to 4 ounces. You could go a little thicker here. That would provide a little bit more protection for a laptop if you were to drop it or something like that. But again, just trying to avoid bulk. We don't want to go too heavy. This leather is still very, very strong. You can actually see some of those natural imperfections I spoke about earlier, like this little scarring here. This is just an indication that it's full grain leather. A lot of people love these little markings, and if you have full grain, they're very hard to avoid, so we just embrace them. All right, if you've been following the channel, you've seen this bag. I have a whole video on me making this bag, this actual specific bag here. And there are a bunch of different weights of leather in here, so it's a great bag to talk about. And one thing I do want to say is there aren't hard and fast rules for all of the, for when to use what leather when. Just know, again, that it's going to produce just a different final product. So if you want a softer bag, you can make a softer bag. A couple of rules I would just say is something like strapping. You always want to make sure you cut from the bend or double shoulder. You really want to avoid belly, because belly just has so much stretch in it. those straps will eventually fail. You don't want to cut a belt out of the belly either for the exact same reason. You don't want too much stretch. So going through this bag piece by piece, you've got thick 9-ounce strapping. For the outer layer, you have 5-6 ounce. Right here, you can tell this is thicker than something like the gusset, which is like 3 or 4. And again, because I'm going around curves, having a thinner leather allows you to make these turns a little bit easier. And then for all of the spots that are gonna carry a bunch of weight, again, I'm gonna go thicker. I'm gonna go 9 ounce for that. So in this bag alone, we have at least 3 different weights. We have 9, we've got 6, and we've got 3. Again, anytime you want a product to maintain its shape, its geometric shape, you wanna go firm temper, and you want to go a little thicker, because again, just a thicker leather is gonna hold its shape a little better. So this sunglass case here, we want it to have some, we want it to protect the sunglasses that are inside of it. So we want it to maintain its shape a little bit instead of just being really soft. And then I just spoke about belts. So here's one of our belts. I tend to use about 9-10 ounce. Going thicker than that can just kind of feel uncomfortable. You can make a super thick belt as long as you don't feel like it's uncomfortable around your waist. But we always thin down where the buckle goes. Obviously that just helps reduce bulk here because it's doubled up. So again, I tend to recommend harness leather, bridle leather, skirting leather, any equestrian application leather works great for belting because when you use it with horses, you need to be super strong. You need to have some kind of weather resistance because you're riding a horse, you're out there in the elements. All right, before I was talking about how if you want something to maintain its geometric shape, you should use a thicker, firmer leather. So this is 5-ounce Butero. This is actually from Title Theory. Samantha Hook is the owner of Title Theory. She works right out of our space and she sells goods in our store. We just love her stuff. So she sells on consignment here and we're gonna be doing a lot of projects together in the future. This is an awesome surf fin inspired clutch. It's available in our store and will be available online for anybody that wants to grab something like this. So she makes this amazing barrel bag. Again, if she made this in a super glovey leather, it would kind of collapse in on itself and it'd lose this really cool shape. This very striking shape that really stands out. And she also makes this one that she calls the amoeba bag. I think it looks like an avocado, but it's an amoeba too. So she only uses, well, not I won't say only, but almost as exclusively uses 5-ounce Butero for most of her goods. Just because belly has looser grain doesn't mean it's useless. When we get big hides to cut for our belts, we don't throw the bellies away. We make coasters out of them. Because these aren't like weight bearing, they're not being stretched or pulled, we can cut them out of the belly or the neck and they work great for stuff like this. So definitely don't waste your bellies or your necks. Find some simple uses like this for it. And then let's see, this last bag we have here, we have a couple different layers again. And this is because I wanted to maintain or achieve a certain aesthetic, a certain feel. So this has thick kind of belting leather for the strap and also running through here. This is very like boho style bag. But then this is a very glovey milled Essex. So this is just like Horween Dublin, but it's actually just doesn't have the waxes and oils that the Horween Dublin has. This is a beautiful leather. It's nice and soft from the start and it gets even softer. And this is 4-ounce. When it comes to bags, you can do any weight you want, just it's, again, I've repeated myself like 3 times, it's gonna affect the final product. So something like this is a pretty heavy leather. It's close to like 7 ounces, but because it's, has so many waxes and oils in it, it still feels soft in your hand and it can still take a cool shape. This is an amazing boot leather, by the way. And it's also, I wanted to mention, it's a pull-up leather. So you can see as I disperse those waxes and oils, it changes the look of the bag. So I can crinkle it up and you get this very like distressed, kind of rugged look. Again, this is called pull-up leather. It's very popular. A lot of times it'll be annotated on the website that it is a pull-up leather. And that just means it's got waxes and oils in it that when they're dispersed, they change the look because those oils are going away and then they slowly come back and it will be kind of uniform again. Okay guys, so hopefully you know exactly what kind of leather to buy for your next project. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments or DM me on Instagram. I try and respond to absolutely everybody. I really want to make this channel about spreading the amazing craft that leathercraft is. So we appreciate your guys' support. Please subscribe. And as always, if you didn't know, I'm the owner of Open Sea Leather. If you want to support us outside of watching these videos, go grab a belt, grab a wallet, If you guys want me to make something new, if you have an idea for design, shoot it to me. I love that. I love the back and forth. So thanks for watching and stay tuned.